Good morning. Welcome to another In Conversation with Brad Phillips here of Haggerty. Telling you what, we have got a really fun one today because my friend Art Cervantes, the founder of RADwood, prolific podcaster and lover of 80s and 90s vehicles, particularly Japanese stuff, is with us today to tell us all about how his great brain works. How's it going, Art?
Hello, doing great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Now, look, we're kind of a bi-coastal thing here. I'm right near the Atlantic Ocean in Maryland, and you're over on the other side of the world. But yet, this connection seems to work all right.
That's right. Yeah, we seem to be doing all right.
Well, a lot of people know you from your podcast series. I think you guys are, the last thing I saw, you're probably about 600 of these things by now.
Yeah, somewhere around there. That's right. Yeah, so it's a group of us, four guys that we're all out here in the Santa Cruz area, Northern California. Bunch of gearheads just basically talking cars. That's kind of how that whole thing goes.
And you grew up in Santa Cruz. I think that's pretty well publicized. And you've grown up, you've had probably 60 cars or so over the years. Did this start as a kid? Like, were you just into these things from the get-go?
Well, it definitely helped that my dad owned a auto body and detail shop. So I spent a lot of time in there. Growing up, those are some of my earliest memories. Literally, like, the smells of the chemicals are probably not the greatest thing, but I mean, I can identify certain products and whatnot. So that helped a lot. My dad was a big gearhead. He was also a pilot. So pilots tend to be car people a lot of the time. And especially you go to the hangars, right, where they store these things, and they typically have a lot of space and they pay a lot of money for that. So they stuff cars underneath the wings. So cars and mechanical stuff have always been a part of my life. Yeah.
I've been to a lot of car collections that are housed in airplane hangars.
Yeah.
And there's always a loophole. Like there's an old Piper Cub chassis, hanging from the rafters so they can say, oh no, we use this for airplanes. It's legal.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think I've seen that exact scenario that you're talking about, actually.
Torrance, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, there's that one.
Yeah. Well, so obviously you came in with this Driving While Awesome. You guys do a lot of really cool events. Talk to me about how you became this person, like your love of cars. How do you transition to this really cool event-focused company to share all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it really starts with me as a gearhead and really going out to events like track events and autocross and tinkering with my cars and also with communities, right? So back when forums were big, in the early 2000s or whatever, I started getting, or late 90s, early 2000s, I started getting really into that and really communicating with different people in our area and across the country with what they're doing with their cars and all that kind of stuff. And then started actually organizing my own events, driving events here regionally. And back then it was in the Honda scene. So, it was literally organizing a drive to the coast and then barbecuing at a beach, just cool, fun stuff like that. And so that's where that kind of started. And then after that, I got an opportunity with GoPro. I started there as an early employee where I got an opportunity to really apply that passion and say, you know what, there's a huge opportunity here, guys. I know we have one marketing guy. I'm over here in international sales, but it was a company of 12, 13 people at that point. And so I'm like, let's try to seed these cameras out there. Let's try to get these cameras into people's hands and in the automotive space. And luckily the founder or the co-founder is a big gearhead as well and motorsport fanatic. So he gave me a lot of flexibility back then to kind of do whatever that I wanted and gave me free reign. And through that, I got involved in some big partnerships and met a lot of cool people. I was handling the go-to-market strategy internationally. So I would travel overseas and I would sort of obviously focus on the business, all the verticals, right? Surf, skate, snowboard, whatever. But me being a gearhead, I would try to connect locally with the automotive space and those people. And then from that, develop real relationships beyond the cameras and all that. And so that's kind of where things really started to snowball. And then one of the guys on the Driving While Awesome podcast who co-founded that podcast, because originally it was just two guys. It was Lane Skelton and Brian McQueen, who are still on there. And Brian and I worked at GoPro together. And so, we had known each other from other, car racing stuff and, whatever. But at that point we were working together there, and he approached me, mentioned something about this podcasting they were trying to do, and it was kind of vague. I was like, it was kind of like at the cafeteria, the company cafeteria deal, where I was like kind of trying to get a drink, and he's trying to talk to me, and I was on the move, and I'm like, what? So what are you guys doing? And I'm like, all right, we'll talk about it later. And eventually, I actually ended up being on the show I think they were about 11 months, 12 months into the thing, and at that point, it was just they had added Warren Madsen, who's also on the show. That's the fourth member, and they're buddies in the Santa Cruz area, and they were just literally kind of, as we try to say, just kind of like hanging out, drinking beers, and talking with buddies. Like that was literally the concept. It was just an opportunity to talk about car stuff when you have your day job, you have your family, you have everything else, and this was a way to do the old thing where you would hang out in your garage and tinker with stuff and talk about cars. Instead, this was a way to talk about it and broadcast it to the world. And so I got involved with them, being friends, and that was 5 years ago now or so. So it's just kind of escalated from there. All very like-minded people. We're all into community. We all love to tinker. We all love projects. We love all sorts of cars. We're very open-minded with that as well. Even though we have our niches, as you mentioned, I really Japanese cars have been kind of my background, but I love it all and have had everything. That's the Drive While Awesome side of things. And as you said, it's 600 episodes plus now into it, and we have a global audience. We put on multi-day driving events. These the Coastal Range Rally, which are great. They're very successful, and we literally sell out within a few hours. It's pretty wild, and we have on average over 100 people on these things. So it's not a small kind of a little tour. These are big multi-day deals.
Sure.
And
we put on a bunch of tours, and I love participating in vintage car tours. Any kind of thing where you can get car people together out driving is a really fantastic thing to me. It's just the best. So when you're doing these, from what I've read about them, I've never had a chance to go on one, but as soon as we get on the other side of all this, I'm there. Let's get out there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're really attracting, it's a real grassroots effort of people. Talk about how people can apply and even get on these rallies. It's a little different from a lot.
Yeah. So it's not, I think what you're referring to is a lot of the big money ones out there that are, extremely formal, and it's a huge, process. And, it's kind of a funny thing because we originally, I guess, let me step back for a second. The whole concept was about really having a place for us to drive our own cars, right? We all had 80s and 90s cars. That's what we're most passionate about. That's what we grew up with. That's what we first started driving, all that. And so we wanted a place to enjoy these cars in this kind of space, going out and enjoying them on the roads, and also with a cool, rad group of people. And there was no place to do that. It was all pre 75 classics, as they call them. I call them metal bumper classics. And then you have your modern supercar stuff, right? And there's nothing in between. And so we're like, you know what? Like, we know roads, we have event experience. Let's do it. At the time I had a Porsche 993, Lane is 944. We had E30s, E36 M3, just all of these cars, right? And so we're like, let's just go for it. Let's put together an awesome route and, do this whole thing. And that was the first event, about 4.5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. And so we had a great response from people. I mean, a lot of people had these cars and wanted to enjoy them, and it became very obvious that there is something here. There's a big fan base around these things. And so after that, we decided to put them on more regularly. And originally, it was to be focused mostly on 80s and 90s cars, right? We were not super strict. There was, I think, on that first event we had like a BMW 2002 Alpina, and we had a Lamborghini Jarama or something. So it was pretty mixed up. I think we might have even had, I think on that one we had it was like an early 50s huge British coupe. I can't remember what it was. It was a Bristol. It was a Bristol. Yeah, we had so we were accepting, and obviously with the podcast we already had an audience. So it's a big group of people, and from that is really where I apologize, but going back to your question about how you apply for these things. So originally it was literally us broadcasting out on our show, throwing a thing on Instagram, and go to the site, sign up. And we did sort of vet the people, and it was kind of the opposite type of vetting. We wanted a really eclectic group of people. We wanted fun, interesting people that have interesting backgrounds, especially a history with their car, stuff like that. So it's really about building an awesome group of folks, and getting them together, and us wanting to hang out with them as well, right? It's really spans the full spectrum. It's like it could be an 18-year-old kid with his first E30 or Honda CRX, to a billionaire who is a super down to earth guy, and it's not just trying to be elitist in any way. It's really trying to get a cool group of folks. So that's how that goes. I mean, we're super inviting and pretty open to anyone applying. The thing that gets tricky is that we do want cars that have a sense of occasion, we say, right? So it's got to be something cool and interesting. Yes, a 2018 Golf GTI or whatever is a cool little car, but is it the most interesting thing? And it's about the conversation, because we all want to see these cars out there, and we all want to interact, and so also for yourself, right? Because it's about an adventure and having a good time. And so a very modern insulated car is maybe a little too easy. It's almost cheating, right? You want something that has a little bit, is maybe not necessarily more visceral, but a more sense of occasion, right? It's more interesting, something that you look forward to driving on the weekend, versus just like, I'm going to go to the grocery store today, whatever.
I love that terminology, by the way. Sense of occasion is a really great way to think about it.
Yeah, so that's the main criteria, we call it. But recently, what has happened is, we have something called Patreon. I don't know if you've heard of this. Sure. And so Patreon is a platform where we can give our audience some kind of more than just what they get on the podcast, right? So there's some really cool features, different interaction they can have with us, access to events, some exclusive stuff, swag and things like that too, of course, opportunities to win things. But we made it so that we announce the rallies on Patreon first. That's part of the incentive, that people have to sign up for Patreon, which has then resulted in only patrons going on rallies, right? Because now everyone wants to sign up to be a patron member so they can be on the rally. So they usually sell out to patrons only. And now we try to leave a little bit of room, and we allow a few other folks. But that's kind of what it is in a nutshell. And so, but most importantly, I think, what this rally has done is that not only has it become a great place for people to get together and enjoy these cars and have these amazing adventures, but I really call it the genesis of RADwood, because we've talked about this passion for 80s and 90s cars, right? And a place to enjoy them, and we didn't have a place to celebrate them, really, right? And so that's where that kind of comes from. And we, I don't mean to talk forever here. So if you have
well, all I have to say is the meat on the bone of this is RADwood. It's so cool. It's so epic. Hagerty has been on board with this, I think, since the beginning, or darn close to it. Understanding that it's not just a car show for 80s and 90s cars. It is the whole thing. It's the music. It's the period dress. It's the right kind of cars that evoke that spirit. These are incredible things to go to. Like they're so cool. So the fact that you guys kind of made that, it's like a magic sauce around one of these events. So please tell us more about RADwood, because it's so much fun. I think we may have an internet connectivity issue back there. He's in his backyard in California. He's got a Wi-Fi hotspot that may be leaving us a little bit dangling there. But for those of you that are out there.
Yeah, I got most of that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I got most of that. It did get a little glitchy there for a second.
I just teed you up for talking about RADwood, and I know that in our photo behind you, that's that's your first winner, I think. And
yeah.
Here we go.
So about that image there. So that was our first event, and so as I talked about, with the Dremel Awesome stuff, that was sort of where we started to really explore this idea. And then we talked about it with friends, and it turns out that some of our friends also had, similar ideas. They, also appreciate these cars, and, they wanted to do something cool. And so that's where, we came up with this concept. And so Warren there on the right, who's part of RADwood and Dremel Awesome, he came up with RADwood, because we were talking about the Goodwood revival being kind of an inspiration, right? So it's really celebrating a specific era through music, through culture, through fashion, and of course motorsport and the cars. And so rad being a perfect word that represents this time frame, and a word that was used a lot, and the wood coming from the Goodwood thing. So it's portmanteau of that, and that's what RADwood is. And so for this first event, we literally just decided, okay, let's book a space, and maybe do a little bit of curation, and we'll make an announcement on our podcast, tell a few friends, almost no marketing, and we'll throw a boombox on a car and just see what happens, And obviously we said, bring your 80s and 90s car, dress the part, and we'll have some music and a food truck, maybe. And so at that event we had about 500 people, and about 180 cars or 150 cars, I can't remember. And that was enough of an impact to really show us that, okay, there's something here. We really gotta think about this, and see how we want to expand this, and do something with it. So, but yeah, as you said, this was the first winner of the Radiston Show Award. And as you can see, we didn't even have a trophy of that truck. We didn't even have a trophy. So I think Warren brought one of his little Testarossa scale models, and we wrote something on the bottom like Radisson Show with a silver Sharpie or something, and that truck, I believe, just broke the record for a Toyota pickup truck sale on Bring a Trailer just a week ago or so. It's an absolutely impeccable truck that was obviously built to the Back to the Future spec, the Marty McFly spec, if you will. And so it's absolutely spot on with every single detail, even down to the dealership sign, as you can see there. The dashboard is signed by all the stars in the film, and all that. But so that, yeah, the truck sold for, I want to say, like 55 grand or 58 grand, I can't remember. People are really stoked on this stuff. And so but yeah, from that we decided, okay, well, let's book a bigger venue. Let's put some marketing behind this. Let's look at some partners. Let's build out a proper event. And that was our first event in LA. And that was December of 2017. And that was a big bump as well. We had, I think, close to 400 cars at that event and about 1,500 people. And so, and that was kind of the thing that really catalyzed this whole thing, from a couple of us jumping ship on our day jobs and really saying, okay, there's something here. Let's really commit to this. And it's grown significantly, as you know. I mean, we've had events all over the country and now internationally. That event there that you have up, that is our last Austin event. And Austin was that, yeah, I think the first weekend in February, or was it the last weekend? I can't remember, but it was in February. And as you can see, this is right before COVID, right? So we had a super packed show. We had around 700 cars. It's really one of our biggest events, if not the biggest, every year now. The Austin crowd really gets it. They all dress up. It's like, I want to say like 80% of the people dress up, which is cool. And we have some really heavy hitting cars that come out. As you can see, we have a Porsche 959, Countach, F40, and then behind the F40 was a Le Mans participating Porsche 962, the Repsol liveried car. Because we do celebrate everything, as you said, it's not only the fashion, the music, the culture, but also race cars, street cars. We have everything from a kid with his first Mazda Miata out there to this kind of stuff, which is great.
Well, and I've mentioned, I graduated high school in 87. So all this is like the sweet spot for me. Every one of these Countaches from my high school wall, all of that. And I think I mentioned, we did another one of these. We talked about our favorite Japanese cars of the 80s and 90s. And really clean first gen Acura Integra is something I would kill to find. And I've only seen good ones at your events, and they know what they've got. So I'm not stealing one of those anytime soon.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's funny how that has happened, right? So, so a buddy of mine, he jokes all the time. He just posted it a month ago or so, but I had about 11 years ago or so, I had probably one of the nicest CRXs in the country. I mean, it was absolutely perfect, and it was absolutely original. It was a 1988 CRX SI. And it's my favorite year. It's, the first of the facelift and all that, or the second generation, I should say. it was all original, one family owned car. I mean, super nice car. And I sold it to him, I think at the time for $3,500, and that was a bro deal. I was like, I was like, but I wanted like 38 or something. And, and we're talking about that. And so he had the car for a couple years, I think. And then at that point, I think that they had hit rock bottom in price. And so he could not get, he could not get $3,000 for the car. I think he sold it for $2,500, like after having it on Craigslist for 6 months or something. A car like that now is a $25,000 car. Like, if you look at Bring a Trailer, it's incredible. And that's in a 10-year span. Right. So, and it just goes to show, there's been a generational shift, as you're describing with what's most relevant, especially when you're in a different position. You were in high school then, so that's like your most memorable, most nostalgic kind of time period, possibly, right? So for a lot of people, when you first start to drive, all the stuff you see out there, what you lust for the most that you can't have because you're a broke 16-year-old and you want the 944 or whatever. So for me, it was a little different. I'm a little younger, but it's what was most formative for me, right? It's what I remember seeing as a kid, going to racing events with my dad, when I was sitting in with my dad's friends and all that kind of stuff. This picture that's up right now is of our event in 2018 in LA. That was at the Peterson Automotive Museum, and that's arguably the best street skater ever of the era, of course. His name's Sal Barbier, and he's now become a good friend of ours, and that is one of our cars. And this became kind of iconic now, and it's been shared a ton, and it's become like the RADwood image, right? We talk about the celebration of the cars, the culture around the cars, the lifestyle, and then of course people dressing up and all that. So this was a pretty epic moment for us, really special. And it's just I hate to say it's like the pinnacle. I hope that we're still in an upward trajectory, but this is one of the coolest things we've ever had happen.
I have you and I have talked. I've had people reach out saying, "Hey, how do we get a RADwood event in our area?" We certainly helped. I think we were talking about one up in Boston.
Right.
And we've got a couple of questions even already that are coming in about when will one of these happen in the southeastern U.S. When will one of these happen in northern Michigan? Now that may be salted in. Someone near Traverse City is looking for something a little close to home. Right. I went to the one in the Philadelphia Navy Yards. They really span coast to coast. So what's the plan on how you're going to expand these as we get out of this, maybe in the fall?
Yeah, that's a great question because, it's a big challenge for us. We're so stoked that there's so much passion and interest in what we're doing. And part of it is really trying to hit all the major regions in the country, right? So that, we do satisfy that demand, if you will. But we also have to be sensitive to a few other things, right? Oversaturation of the events, they become too frequent, too close to each other, then it loses its appeal. It loses the vibe. It's something that people really look forward to. And this is, people drive across the country sometimes because they don't want to wait till next year. Like it's that big. And I think that's part of the excitement and the passion behind it. And you can easily really kind of kill that vibe, if you will, if you oversaturate it. The other thing is also, we have to be sensible, right? Unfortunately, we are a business. So we have to understand where are the places that are going to be successful, both from a car standpoint, having a bunch of really cool cars, to also to have the crowds, right? To have a large group of people. And so we try to focus on larger metro areas that will sort of satisfy a larger geographic area. And we hope that, within 3 hours, you're hitting a lot of major areas that people can then come out and enjoy the event. Like Philadelphia is a great one because you have so many major cities within 3 hours there that it's not a crazy trip, but also it's a big deal, right? It's something to look forward to and to build up. The picture you've even got up here, I'm about 2 hours from Philly. Yeah.
And, I put on my finest tennis whites that day and drove up in the old two-tone 308 there.
That was great.
We had an awesome day out there.
Yeah, that was a fantastic car to see out there too. That has a red interior, right? Yeah. That I love that car. That's such a great color combination. You don't see that, and the two-tone too. The boxer style is, oh man, beautiful. Is that a Euro car, by the way?
No, it was a U.S. spec, California car, Los Gatos Ferrari.
Oh well, just literally 20 miles away from me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that the other thing about that is really we're looking at a strategy right now that may involve scaling back from 12 events a year, right? Because we really try to understand kind of where there's a lot of interest, where there's an opportunity to make a cool event, and that's why we put on events all over the country. And quite frankly, the Southeast is still definitely in need of one, and we're working on that, and that will happen. Um, but you know, that is one of the regions we want to introduce. But I think we want to scale back from the volume and really focusing more on quality, and really building out an even cooler experience, possibly multi-day events, incorporating more of the musical element, right? Having live acts, having some of these people from the industry that um, are ideally, my dream is to find the folks who were, you know, musicians and artists and people of the era that are also car people, because it's such a great tie-in, right? You know, you have your BMXers and your skaters as well, but also even beyond that, right? As we tap into the lifestyle type or side of things, we want to you know, bring in just people that were relevant in the era that would stoke people out, and have an opportunity for people to interact and engage with these folks, building out, you know, Q&As and little panels and stuff like that and talks. So it appeals to a broader group of folks, and that's the thing is. So I think that in the future you're going to see RADwood become a 6 to 8 event type of deal. Again, spread out all over the place, right? So we hit Northeast, you know, Southwest of the U.S., Midwest, South, Northeast, and then Southeast. And I think that's probably as far as we'll go. You know, because again, as I said, it is very costly, it is very time consuming, and we're a small organization. For us to put a lot of effort into a smaller type of thing in Nebraska, right? So as much as as we're stoked that people want us there, I think there are other ways to engage those people, and we want to leverage what we've learned, especially now in this COVID type of era where we have opportunities to do virtual experiences and build that out to kind of fill in the gaps and have people still interact with us and have a good time.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you guys are really on the forefront of social media savvy with Facebook, with Instagram, understanding that building these events, these are all ways that people can, you know, the imagery behind this really helps kind of fuel the passion from getting the best examples of these cars out there. So how does that translate to holding a virtual event? Have you had success in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we tested out our first virtual event just, you know, a few weeks ago now, and it was very great. I mean, super receptive. People were crazy about it. I mean, it was awesome, and it's it's kind of funny, especially now, right? Because there isn't anything going on, so people just can't wait to get out there and do, or even interact with people and do something cool and fun, and more than anything, people want to be entertained. But yeah, we basically made a super basic type of event where you put an image up on Instagram, you tag us, you tag Haggerty, you're a partner of ours, a little plug there, and so you tag a few of our partners and us, and then and you get basically submitted into the pool of cars that we would then grab some to nominate to for the popular vote, I should say. So basically, we had 1,600 people submit cars with the tags, and then we grabbed around 200 nominees, and then it went to the popular vote on our website, and we had different categories. We had raddest dressed, raddest, so it's not just cars, raddest dressed, raddest accessory, raddest domestic, raddest import, raddest truck, raddest motorcycle, and then we had raddest in show. And we had some awesome submissions, and the raddest in show car was just, I mean, it was one of those things where it was almost like unfair. The thing was so ridiculously rad that there was no one even had a chance. You know, it was a 500 SEC Gull Wing Mercedes in pearl white wheels, pearl white grill, and that was done by a company called Sbarro. It was a coach builder in Switzerland. Oh, yeah. That made all these ridiculous cars, right? Kind of Gambalas of the world, you know, the Koenigs in that vein. And of course, the car was bought brand new, sent to Sbarro, and then it was shipped to Colombia in like 1986 or something, you know, or 87. So it was definitely the stereotype, you know, of the era. You know, moving forward, we want to expand on that, right? So It's not just the posting of cars and getting an award, which is cool, and there's participation there. There's interaction and engagement from your community, but there's also the opportunity to build out a virtual experience. And I think you can, music is a big part of what we do, right? So we want to have a live DJ session for a few hours and have people, make requests and have the music playing all day. We want to do live talks like this, interacting with people in the industry, talk about what we're seeing come through on the tag. There's also great opportunities to partner up with guest judges and just a lot of that type of, so really building out the experience more beyond just the okay, tag the thing, put it up on Instagram, user generated content as they call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's exciting. Yeah, the next one is on May 30th. So this is at the end of this month, and it will be basically a full day event, right? 8 to 5 p.m. With different things happening throughout the day, but we're gonna only accept submissions 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific. We should probably update that poster.
Time zone could be helpful, right?
Yeah, time zone. But yeah, so it's been great. I think people really dig this, especially now because this is the only way to engage and interact with other people in the automotive space.
Well, so you've worked your way through. You've been to a lot of these different events. I've only been to the one. I went to the one, obviously, in Philly.
Yeah.
And my experience in this, you go to a lot of car shows and a lot of events like this. Oh, yeah, there's another shot. Me and Boombox guy. He was a riot. I mean, again, it's just so much fun with all the different accoutrements that everybody's walking around with. But the biggest thing I loved about this was you get to an awards ceremony at a lot of shows, place clears out, right? You get maybe a few core people that kind of think maybe their car has a shot in a particular class.
Right.
But most of the crowd, they disperse toward the end of the day.
Yeah.
RADwood, everybody stays in, everybody clusters around because it's such a show even to see. Everybody wants to know who won. And, how do they react to it? It's really different, I think.
Yeah, it is really fun. And everyone gets into it. That's the cool thing about this thing that we put together. It's ultimately not just us as an organization, but everyone that's involved, all the participants, all the attendees. It's such a great vibe. It's such a great group of people. No pretentiousness, no BS, no ridiculous, like weird attitudes. It's just everyone's there to have a good time. And I think it helps that when you're wearing a neon suit or when you're dressed like, and Andre Agassi, it's hard to take yourself seriously. Like, everybody's there just to enjoy each other and have a fun time. And the spirit of the show is so awesome. And yeah, the award ceremonies, everyone's so excited for everyone to win, and it doesn't matter, if you don't win, of course, you're not as stoked, but it's a good time anyways. Yeah.
Well, we've had another question about what your dream band might be to come and play at a RADwood.
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I think that it would vary, from my co-founders and my answer is probably different. Wow. You're kind of putting me on the spot here. I mean, I guess one that really, I can't help it, but I just have to do it. I really want him to be there because he's such an icon of the era, even though he's not the classiest or whatever. But Vanilla Ice, we need to have Vanilla Ice. We need to have Ice Ice Baby performed by Vanilla Ice, and then Go Ninja, Go Ninja Go from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. It just has to happen. And that's one that isn't maybe not the absolute, the most ideal, or it is maybe the most ideal. It's not necessarily the one that I want the most as personal taste or whatever, but I think it has the best fit and for the events, and I think it needs to happen, if that makes sense.
I would throw them maybe Flock of Seagulls. Could
Flock of Seagulls? Yeah. There's Hall and Oates has been kind of a possibility. John Oates.
We see John Oates quite a bit. He's a pretty prolific Porsche guy out there in the world.
That's right. He's around and he's very aware of us too. So it's definitely a possibility.
Well, okay. So the picture up behind you as we flash by.
Yeah. So this
because these freaking Acura Legends again. I want a really super clean Acura Legend, and I can't find one.
They're hard to find, and when you do find them, they come at a premium now. You're right. And so this shot here, I like this picture because it shows the variety of the shows, right? It's you have an Acura Legend coupe, right? And then you have, of course, that's that's not a real 924 Carrera GTS or Carrera GT. It's actually a really interesting car. It's a 924 turbo that was fitted with all of the 924 Carrera GT stuff in period at the dealership. So, it's got the flares and, this is nerdy stuff. But anyways, that's a cool special car. Porsche, of course, Acura Legend. There's a Lancia Delta Integrale behind all those folks standing there. Obviously, a G body back there. A Viper. It's really everything. We like it all, and we like to see the full spectrum of stuff out there. Because it's all fun and interesting. For example, our second NorCal event, we had a Ferrari F50, a Ferrari F40, some kind of roof build, and then a Geo Metro convertible lowrider. All in the RADwood royalty space. And the RADwood royalty space is our curated area that we put together, about 80 to 100 cars. Usually the most iconic, most interesting cars, and those go there, and we build out a kind of an experience around those cars. The rest, let's say we have 400 or 500 cars, those get packed in kind of cars and coffee style as you would see anywhere else. But in this particular space, this is maybe 30 feet from each other, all of these cars, right? And no one batted an eye. No one said, oh my gosh, why would you park that fluorescent pink metallic thing next to my multi-million-dollar car? These guys, the guy in the F50 practically left his F50 running with the door open to go jump out and take pictures of it because he was so excited to see the Geo Metro. And it was the Geo Metro convertible with, done in period, right? With the flashiest, most ridiculous stuff, but it's entertaining, it's fun. It's great. Of course, gold wire wheels and everything, so yeah, it's really all about inclusivity with us. In the future, there will be opportunities to do kind of themed events, and I say that because I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. It's because it's building out a different type of experience within the whole ecosystem of events. So maybe we'll do something where it's just lowriders, just race cars, just right. And so especially now in the virtual space, as we're limited, we want to build out a way to have variety and keep people engaged and interested. So that's likely to happen this year as well.
The stuff that the Koenigs, the Gimbalas that you mentioned, other builds like that, they always make me stop because they're so outlandish compared to anything. Like there was this period in the 80s that they just all of a sudden, it was the more wings and spoilers and wide body kits you could put on it. It was an amazing time. And then everybody kind of went,
yeah. Yeah. It's funny because, I appreciate it all. Like my builds and my personal cars, I always try to keep them very, very clean, simple, understated, well balanced, right? But at the same time, I love me a Koenig wide body Mercedes, and everything in between. So and talk about sense of occasion. I mean, it is the pinnacle of that. It's like if you have a Gambala Avalanche Porsche 930, it's like, that is not your daily driver. That's the one that you go out to just cause a scene, right? And it's just ridiculous. And you can't take yourself seriously while you're driving that. You're out there to have a good time, It's just to be ridiculous, and I love that too, So it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. The tongue firmly in cheek when you're out with that, I think is part of it. Is letting everybody know that you're all having a good time with this. That's so
exactly
key.
Totally.
Well, we've got some other photos. Roll our trusty Matt behind the scenes is rolling a couple through here, I think, unless we've skipped a couple. I wanted to see if we had a picture of the one from the Navy Yards because that was, I think, from that event. Wasn't it like a 560 SEC wide body? It may have had Lambo doors or something like that on it. Even I mean,
it was and the thing that was interesting about that car is that it was a sedan. It was actually a W126 sedan, and typically you see the coupes done, and I had never seen a sedan in person, and it was pretty wild. It was definitely ridiculous, and of course it was Radisson show. I mean, it's those crazy things, and of course sometimes the Countach will win and all that, but if you have one of those cars, one of those coach builds or whatever from the era, it's hard not to give them the trophy because they're just the epitome of the excess and the madness that went on in that period.
Well, if you had unlimited funds, unlimited time, and you could take this thing international.
Mm.
Where's your top international location that you think you could pull off a RADwood event?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, well, it's a tricky question because I think I could pull off the best event in the world in Japan, but we tried Japan and it was tricky. Japan is a very interesting market, and I did a lot of business there. And the thing with Japan is that people are very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very, they're not very keen to adopt new concepts very quickly, right? So it takes time. You have to introduce things slowly and build it up, and they're a little reserved in that way. And I think call it a generalization. I speak Japanese. I know the culture pretty well, but I think all my Japanese friends will agree with me. And I think we went at it too hard, hot and heavy, out of the blue, and we didn't build up enough behind it and really give people an experience or a taste of what it is ahead of that. So we actually had to postpone the event because of lack of interest. And it's one of those things where, as an organization, you have successes and you have failures, and that is it was a big learning experience, and so I would love to revisit that sometime, because talk about all of this crazy stuff. Japan has the best of everything, like when it comes to all the really weird, obscure stuff. And in that era, that their economy was extremely strong. That was, they call it the boom era in Japan, and or bubble, sorry, the bubble era. And they had all the Alpinas, all the AMGs, all the Gambalas, all the Koenigs, all that stuff. And to this day, if you look that up right now, big tip, it's kind of already been spoiled. I knew about this 10 years ago, and I hate myself for not taking advantage of this. But all of those cars are now being purchased from there, and they're being brought here and they're being sold into Europe at a premium, because that's where they live, and a lot of those cars went there. A lot of the supercars, I think that, last time I checked, there were more F40s in Japan than any other country in the world. So that just gives you an idea. And so I just think we could make an incredible event, not only because of the cars, but also just all of the technology. I would love to see all the gadgetry, all the Sony stuff, all the Panasonic stuff they had back then, and some of the pop music of the era was so fun. Integrate it with with what we would bring, right? With obviously international music and everything, American and European. But I think that I want to give that another shot sometime. We were planning on doing Australia this year. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think that has a lot of potential as well. And I think tangentially, because they got a lot of the Japanese stuff that we didn't get. And so I named all of the European cars, but there's all the stuff that we didn't get, right? All the Skylines, all the Cedrics, all the, the Crowns and Centuries, and all of those cars that we didn't see, they didn't exist here. The Nissan Leopards, and all the really weird, obscure stuff, the little K cars.
You're naming great stuff that 3 years ago, I didn't know anything about any of these things. And really? I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a guy, Gary Duncan, over here on my coast, Duncan Imports. Okay. He imports a lot of really weird, neat Japanese cars.
Oh, great.
I was down visiting, and I'm looking at this huge warehouse full of stuff I'd never even heard of before. All right-hand drive, all with beautiful little buttons all over them. And I bought a Toyota Century from him that day, because I'd never seen one before. And I was absolutely floored how cool it was, with that luxurious blue wool interior. And it looked like a Japanese Rolls Royce. I mean, it was.
Yeah. It literally is. That's the idea. And what's funny about those interiors is that traditionally in Japanese culture, leather is considered less luxurious than like what you're describing, like a wool velour type of a fabric interior. And and I kind of agree, I mean, in terms of comfort, and and also there's also a thing about, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, a Japanese friend told me, but that leather also, it makes unflattering noises when you move about it, right? When you go in and out, and that's not polite. So it's just kind of, or just kind of, so a fabric interior won't do that. So apparently that was another reason behind, you see a lot of early Toyota Celsiors, which were basically a Lexus here, and with the fabric interior, and they're fully optioned way beyond any Lexus LS400 or ES that we got here. But they have a velour interior with all the gadgetry.
Well, my Century is a 92, so it's a VG40, so it's got that beautiful little Hemi V8 in it.
Yeah.
And like a moron, I thought I'd just go get a wrecked LS400 and keep it as a parts car for anything I needed. There ain't a bolt on an LS400 that crosses over to a Toyota Century.
No, they're it's definitely a completely different thing for sure.
So now that I know you speak Japanese, you're going to really wish you hadn't told me that.
Why is that?
Maybe eBay Japan is where you can start helping me find some parts.
Yeah. You know what's a great one of the greatest resources for weird, obscure automotive stuff is Yahoo auctions in Japan. They're still hot. Yahoo is a big deal in Japan still. Yahoo auctions I think it's or just if you go to yahoo.co.jp and then you'll immediately get lost because it's all in Japanese. But but one of those links is the auctions, and yeah, you can get everything there. You know, all of these really cool, weird wheels that are now obsolete and all that, and people are very willing to ship internationally. So that's always a great place to look.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point. I mean, I was looking for a bumper for it because I backed into a small tree. Sidebar. It's a really big, long trunk. I mean, I was just backing up, right? And the tree happened to sort of be back where a normal car wouldn't have gotten anywhere near it.
It jumped as you got closer to it, I think. Probably.
Exactly right. It was still growing. And it was literally a $200, $250 item, but the shipping from Japan to get it to me was $1,200.
Ooh,
I'm like,
ouch.
I'm not doing that. I'm going to wait for somebody else to bring one over and maybe smash the front end up, and maybe I harvest the rear for my purposes.
Well, we'll see. Maybe I can help you because there are some importers that basically bring in containers of this stuff, right? And so Century is a tricky one because it's not the hottest, most popular car out there, right? I mean, if it was, you know, and don't get me wrong, as you said, they're masterpieces, but you know, it's just not a ubiquitous car. Whereas if it was a Nissan Silvia or something, I can get you any part tomorrow, right? But yeah, I have some ideas though. We'll have to be in touch.
and this is what happens, everybody, because we just spent 5 minutes talking about a weird Japanese car that you could see at a RADwood event if you would go to one. Absolutely.
Yep. Totally.
We're kind of working through here. Anthony would like to know what your take is on the R34 Skyline, since you mentioned your love of these. They're going to start becoming more available in the States in about 2024. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, they're amazing. It's one of my favorite cars. I think that unfortunately we're going to create a bigger problem for ourselves because once they become legal to import, they're going to skyrocket in price. So try to get in early. I'm recommending, if you can, this is crazy, but I know of people already doing this. You can buy a car now and store it in Japan and have someone maintain it or whatever you want to do, and then import it when it's legal, and you can lock in a better price because they're not cheap already. They're already, you know, they can be a six-figure car depending on the spec and all that. But I have a strong feeling that they're going to get very expensive because they didn't make very many, and they're one of the coolest cars ever made. And on top of that, I think there's very clear, and I mean, Haggerty would know better than anyone, but there's very clear evidence that has happened with the R32. You know, they were dirt cheap when they were coming in initially, and now they're starting to, they've doubled in price since they've, you know, since the last, I don't know, what, 5 years or so, I would say, since I guess in California we have different rules, but you know, 25-year rule or whatever. Yeah, so definitely keep an eye on those. They're super, super cool cars.
I think that's another interesting point about what this RADwood phenomenon has done, because frankly, I think the prices of these have gone up because people have a very visible place to display them and enjoy them and share their love for it. And it's driven up the interest where it was really kind of an underground culture before.
That's true. Yeah. And you know, that's just what happens, right? So, I mean, I think it's just a place where now you have an opportunity to invest, if you will. So, or if you have one of these cars now, your car is appreciated. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it was going to happen naturally. I mean, obviously I'd like to think that we're a catalyst of sorts, but I mean, as you know, as people of a different generation, you know, come of a certain age and become established and have some disposable income, they want what's most relevant to them, you know, and what was most interesting to them when they were younger and what they couldn't afford. And that was going to happen. I think we definitely accelerated that. You know, it could have happened a little more progressively over time, but yeah, no doubt. I mean, I talked about the CRX, you know, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Integra Type R is going for $70,000. You know, I remember being a broke college kid, really wanting one for, you know, and I couldn't afford 15 grand or something, whatever it was at the time, you know, now there's 70 grand, you know, for a good one, and a driver is 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happened with the hot rods in the past. It happened with the Hemi Cudas. You know, they had their big bump, and they'll maybe in 50 years they'll drop back down, I think, and maybe there'll be another correction when everyone's driving a capsule around.
Well, the questions are still coming in. I've got
Cool.
another good one for you. Now, we've talked a lot about the different types of cars that you've met through these events, right? These different sorts of these Skylines and Centuries and really 928s with cool op art interiors and all this sort of stuff. What
Yeah.
about the people? What are some of the really cool people you've had a chance to meet through this that have come out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's man, there's so many. That is probably that. There's definitely and literally thousands more than there are cars, right? But I think it's been great to connect with a lot of the people in the industry that we looked up to, that we actually admire their work, right? Like the Jeff Zwarts of the world, or Patrick Long has become a friend because of RADwood. Really, we knew him kind of tangentially through our podcast in the past, but there's a lot of people in the industry in the motorsports space, and Lee Keen has become a friend who builds the cool Safari 911s. I didn't know Lee Keen before this. He came out to our we had been interacting on Instagram and stuff, but he came out to our event in Atlanta a few years ago, and
Yeah.
since then we've kept in touch, and it's been great. So really kind of connecting with a lot of there's a lot of heavy hitters and a lot of like kind of opinion leaders in the space that we've become friends with, but also very interesting people with that kind of drive their own communities and really are involved, because I'm really interested in that as a group. Like, of course, individuals, there's been so many cool people, and so many stories, it's hard to remember them, right? And I'm pretty terrible as it is when it comes with names and unfortunately faces. But in terms of up in Seattle, there's so many great people up there at the LeMay Museum, at Avance, all these groups that really focus on building out community and events and cool things for people to do in this space. And so that's probably the thing that's made the biggest impact on me, is just like seeing how they do that, and really admiring that work, and being a part of it now, right, and collaborating and doing that.
Well, what do you think is going to be next? Everyone's carrying are the 2000s cars that are going to be another big resurgence in people interested in cars from that era as well? Just going to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially the early 2000s, they were very, very like really solid, great cars. There was a little bit of a dip maybe in the late 2000s, and then kind of coming back up maybe, but in the early 2000s there was a lot of really great cool cars were introduced, right? Like I think E39 M5, it's right at the cusp of like being RADwood eligible, but it's a phenomenal car. It's already become a bit of an icon, a modern classic, like stuff like that is definitely going to be seen in there. There's a lot of the Honda stuff as well, right? Like your 2001, 2003s Civic Type Rs. Those cars are super cool. They're not quite rad, but they're cool, and those are very interesting. And every make was really kind of doing something cool at the time. I mean, even Nissan was doing like forget GTRs. I mean, like the Nissan Altima SERs and stuff like that. Just like really kind of cool, weird, powerful V6s and good handling cars that have kind of fallen by the wayside because they things kind of go through that cycle, right, where they're brand new and hot, and then they become kind of dull and boring and irrelevant. Then they become sort of cool, and then they become very, very interesting again. So I can totally see that happening with I'd say the first few years into the 2000s. It's going to take a little bit more time. I think people are still really hot in this. This is still very new. But in the next 5 years, I can totally see that happening.
For really any really seriously pre-computer screened car, there's a purity in just having clicky buttons, steering wheel, by the grace of God, maybe a stick shift, and that really all that stuff starts to fade away after your era and just a little beyond it. So I certainly understand why people are so drawn to it all, because it's simple, yet not that simple. I mean, it's still light years ahead of Mustangs and stuff from the 60s. I mean, you get into cars with real HVAC controls and lights that work. They're incredibly useful. A car from like an E30 BMW. I've talked about this before. It's a legit classic car now. And it also does everything amazingly well. It's got great air conditioning. The lights work. You can see in it at night. I mean, there's really no drawback from a car like that. And there are a lot of them of this era. And the fact that we can celebrate them all with our heads held up and not have to feel like, oh, I'm driving my mom's old hand-me-down. It's not really, it's just an old car. Well, it's not just an old car. It's a total legit classic as much as any of the other ones now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for solidifying that. See, Haggerty said these are classics. and no, I agree. And that's what's so awesome about these cars. And that's what's been the biggest draw for me and for all of our friends and especially the organization. We really feel that they're the perfect balance, right? Of like modernity while still being kind of vintage in a way, right? Like as you're describing, they still have manual controls, a stick, and no computer screens. I mean, maybe a little tiny LCD or whatever, remember the trip computers from the E30s or E36s, whatever. But I mean, I really like that. Yeah, they're very pure in a way, but they have that level of modernity that allows you to go out and drive them every single day without it being a huge ordeal, and they're reliable, and that you can use them and drive them hard, and parts are readily available and still at this point not super expensive, so it's a great balance there that you get with those cars.
And it's a fun blend of the tech too, because this era, carburetors were on the way out, fuel injection was kind of on the way in, so you get this fun bubble in the middle of the old world versus the new, as they sort of were trying to figure it out with varying degrees of success depending on the manufacturer. But we really appreciate you being here. This has been awesome to talk about these events and obviously take these side trips down memory lane about these other cars. I want you to keep an eye out for something for me also. I know I've already mentioned the...
got a little glitchy there, sorry. You okay?
We're all good. Okay? We're fine. We're doing great. All right, Art's freezing up again. Santa Cruz area, California's got a sunspot over his house, but it's been absolutely fantastic. It's been absolutely fantastic.
So what's your weather situation out there right now?
Gorgeous. I live out on the eastern shore, and it's the best time of year. There's no humidity. I can work out in the garage with it not being 1,000 degrees out there because it's not air conditioned. And
beautiful.
Got a big project happening, so it's good.
I did want to mention one thing, and this is kind of interesting, especially because I think that a lot of people that are into domestic cars traditionally, American cars, the malaise era really kind of spilled into the 80s pretty deep in the US. And so a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Why are you into 80s and 90s cars? Those cars were really bad, or they were so slow, or they were so hampered by emissions equipment and all that. And, it is a thing, unfortunately. I mean, and so I think at one point, as you said, there was a transition, right, where they were getting the fuel injection sorted and where cars were becoming more efficient. And then with that came more power. And it did take a little bit of time to ramp. And so I think, unfortunately, it's pretty obvious that the Europeans and the Japanese kind of jumped on board a little earlier, and their cars were a little more efficient, a little more powerful, and a little better built earlier than the US, the American cars were. And it took a little time to catch up. And but I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love me a 4i Fox body Mustang and and all that stuff. So I mean, I still want a Saleen. I want one really bad, but now unfortunately they're super expensive, right? It's interesting how there was that transition. And don't get me wrong, the fuel injection thing is a big one, or not wrong, but I guess I shouldn't let it be. I earlier when I mentioned kind of the different types of things that make a car special and well-rounded, I didn't say the lack of carburetors, and that is a big deal for me. I don't like carburetors, I don't know. Forget tinkering. It's just the gas smell. I can't handle. I'm sorry. I can't hang. I'm sorry.
Well, as a Californian, you've got tough stuff with carburetors anyway. Any carburetor you had on a car out there had more vacuum stuff hung up on it than other places in the country. So I could see why you didn't be frustrated by it.
Absolutely. And I think it gets a little tricky. It's kind of a bit of a dicey conversation to have. But I think a lot of those cars in the early 80s now, since they're less restricted, you could do more stuff with them. But I think ironically, you can remove all those vacuums and all those vacuum lines and whatever, and make them significantly more efficient, right? And make them run better and cleaner, which is hard, to get past sometimes, to really convey that to people. But I think that's an opportunity to improve those early cars that were hampered, you know, and kind of really saddled by all this
That's
gnarly
right.
equipment. Yeah.
Check your local regulations.
Yes. Yeah. Do that. Do that. Yes.
Well, and like, okay, so we're wrapping up, but yes, Chevrolet Citation, I grew up with, not a great car, but would I not kill to see a clean one at a RADwood, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, one of the most popular cars we've had actually in LA, the most recent, it was an Orange County event. Hot Rod Magazine did a whole feature on it. It was a captive import. It was is it a Dodge or a Plymouth Sapporo? I think it was a Plymouth, right? Which a Plymouth Sapporo, which is it's a Mitsubishi Colt in Japan.
Yeah.
And so it's a you know, a Dodge branded vehicle, but it looks like a Japanese little thing. And it's funny because those cars, I don't, was it a, no, was it a Challenger? It was a Challenger or a Charger. The reason I bring it up is that it was a very iconic American name, you know, and you go from your Challenger muscle car to this little dainty thing, and this is your Challenger that you got in the early 80s. And I can see why people frown upon that, but at the same time, it was a super cool, weird, obscure car. You know, I mean, it was a really funky time period, and the car itself is actually very interesting if you check it out, with the technology and the features that it has and all that. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I
Well,
love them
Art,
though.
thank you very, very much. Now, look, tell everybody how they can find you. Tell everybody where your podcast is and finding you in your events.
Sure, yeah. So radwood.org is the easiest place to find, you know, our schedule, all that, some content, and coming up here, a lot more merch. We have some super rad merch. I don't know if you got to see that at Radwood Philly, but we have some awesome you know, designers on board that. Oh, you got a shirt, yeah. So yeah, Lane in particular, over team Lane Skelton is he is a phenomenal designer, and he makes some really, really cool stuff. But we're gonna really tap into the media space a little bit, put out some more content out there, you know. So check us out there. Drivingwhileawesome.com for all the other stuff, for the podcast, for the multi-day driving events, the rallies. There's that. We do a thing called Morning Motors out here as well. So we're kind of the local cars and coffee, if you will. So those are the two best places for, you know, the sites. And then on social media anywhere, Radwood Official or Driving While Awesome.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Art. This has really been fantastic. I think you're one of the people that's out there doing great work out there. Appreciate you very much, and it's always good to see you. Hopefully when in September, we'll all be back out in the world rubbing elbows again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and us as an organization. And again, really looking forward to hanging out and doing cool stuff.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in for another In Conversation with. Our guest, Art Cervantes, has been a fountain of information on the RADwood generation and all his events. And check out his Driving While Awesome podcast as well, as he mentioned. All right. We'll see you guys next week. And we'll see you later.